Tombstone halfway through the match against the two Wyatt family members they took on at the Survivor Series, costing The Undertaker and Kane the match. Kane would then walk out on The Undertaker, and eventually The Undertaker would return to challenge Kane like he did a number of years ago for WrestleMania back in 1998. I thought that would be awesome to set up for The Undertaker versus Kane match, because Kane would be jealous of the attention The Undertaker received for his 25th anniversary. I thought that would have been very effective and a great way of pushing Kane again. That was put on the back burner. That wasn't the way that it went. So we're kind of waiting on another direction for this whole angle to take, and I hope that something comes to this that's actually meaningful and is actually worth talking about months from now. Now, I did elaborate on Demon Kane versus The Undertaker for a written column for my website for In This Corner with Jonathan Clarke, and I gave my predictions on The Undertaker versus Kane match. Now, I'm kind of leaning in the direction of Kane beating The Undertaker, because a lot of wrestlers who go into their final matches usually come out not winning the match. They come out as the loser, on the losing end. The matches we saw with Stone Cold Steve Austin, we saw it with Shawn Michaels. The big names always come out on the losing and the receiving end of the loss in their final matches. So be it that the track record of legends going into their final matches have not been that great in the way of victories, and last stands seeming more appropriate for the likes of Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin, be it that Stone Cold Steve Austin was one of their biggest names, so was Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker probably would fit into the category of losing his final match, because winning his last match would completely defeat the purpose of even having The Undertaker's last match, because The Undertaker's had his fair share of victories, and also he's had his fair share of losses. But the thing is, having The Undertaker win his match and that's it, it's all over and done with, would be just completely pointless and defeat the purpose of even having The Undertaker versus Kane. So there are a lot of ways this one could go, because I know there are people out there that think The Undertaker should win. There are more people out there who probably think The Undertaker should lose this match. So it's a win-win situation or a lose-lose situation, whatever way you want to choose to look at it. But there are a number of ways this one could go. But I'm just thinking that it's more appropriate for The Undertaker to actually lose his last match, and obviously the appropriate one for him to lose too, given their history, would be Kane, because who else does The Undertaker have a significant amount of history with, and actually history that fans remember with more than anyone else in the wrestling business? It's got to be Kane. And because Sting is out with a neck injury, and it's unknown at this point in time when Sting is going to be returning, or even if Sting is going to be returning, and if we've seen the last of the Sting character, then The Undertaker versus Kane match is the only other alternate option. They have the alternate route so to take for WrestleMania 32, and I think that would be awesome, seeing Demon Kane versus The Undertaker. Just the psychology of the match, the mind games that will be played weeks later before the match. I think it would be awesome seeing this match happen, just because of the psychology of this match, because it's very rare that you see two wrestlers that have the amount of understanding of psychology when it comes to The Undertaker and Kane. I mean, who else has such a diverse understanding of psychology when it comes to that factor of professional wrestling rather than The Undertaker and Kane? Just imagine the psychology that we would see in this match. And again, you're waiting on something to push Kane because of, and The Undertaker versus Kane rivalry being reunited would be a perfect way of pushing Kane, because it doesn't seem like they're going to be pushing Kane in the direction of being champion anytime soon, even though he's in matches with Roman Reigns on house shows, which are obviously just being used to put over someone like a Roman Reigns. He's also headlining it with a number of big names in WWE this close to the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, and it wouldn't surprise me none if Kane was in the Royal Rumble match this year and came so close to winning the Royal Rumble. That would be another way of Kane challenging The Undertaker at WrestleMania 32 for The Undertaker's final match. Say Kane is in the Royal Rumble match early in 2016. He comes in at number 25 through 27, and he comes so close to winning the Royal Rumble, either in the final three or the final two, and then is eliminated at the last minute. A couple of weeks after that, he comes out and challenges The Undertaker to WrestleMania, because he has no meaning to go to WrestleMania after setting his sights on going to WrestleMania for that one meaningful reign as WWE World Heavyweight Champion, which he tried to achieve at the expense of Daniel Bryan, because you remember how Kane was Daniel Bryan's first challenge in the fallout of WrestleMania 30 last year, when Demon Kane returned and challenged Daniel Bryan for the championship because of their history as part of Team Hell No, because he was endorsed by Stephanie as the director of operations in WWE, and they tried to push it with Demon Kane going up against Daniel Bryan, which really went nowhere, because Daniel Bryan suffered from that injury, which they still don't know really much about. Last year, early in his championship reign, I think he had one less championship title defense than Brock Lesnar actually had. It was because of the injury, of course, because that was sustained at WrestleMania, and Kane definitely prolonged that injury and really aggravated that injury in that program weeks prior to their match at last year's Extreme Rules pay-per-view. So Kane has definitely had his fair shot at being champion, but he just has yet to come through. And I would have thought by now they would have really been pushing Kane as a champion, which is why I really feel, I can't help but feel for wrestling fans who want to see something ultimately more greatly achieved by Kane, because I know there are millions of Kane fans out there who do exist, who have been waiting on this for forever, much like myself. Now, I haven't been the biggest Kane fan. I'll reiterate that again for you. It's just been brought to my attention how much they keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, putting it on the proverbial back burner, doing something far more creative with Kane's character. And maybe if you're with Bray Wyatt or Roman Reigns, really isn't cutting the proverbial mustard, putting the icing on the cake for Kane, because we're waiting on something to throw that icing over the cake for Kane's career and really to cap off a phenomenal 17 through 18-year run with WWE. Kane, of course, is getting up there in age, like The Undertaker, of course, turning 51, 52 this coming March. So obviously both The Undertaker and Kane are up there in age. They want to slow it down a little bit, and I think the best way of slowing it down is by giving Kane at least one meaningful reign as champion. And the thing is, I think that what really is upsetting WWE is they want, really conflicting WWE is the fact they want to give Kane a meaningful reign as champion, but given his age and with how they're supposed to be creating stars of the future, I think it's kind of a questionable thing because of how Kane's age is really playing a factor, and with how Kane, if he was going to have one championship reign before his retirement, his departure from the company, much like The Undertaker, would have to have a meaningful reign as WWE champion, because the answer to that is, you figured it out, you've hit the nail on the head, he has not had that meaningful reign as the champion. It doesn't exist for Kane, because one day, less than 24 hours, as WWE champion really frustrates a lot of people. That's a blemish on Kane's record that he wants to erase. You got to believe Kane wants to erase that blemish of having less than a 24-hour reign as WWE champion, and really the only way of doing that is by giving Kane a meaningful reign that would last probably the equivalent of 4 through 5 months. And given his age and with how WWE want to create future stars in the way of Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins all the time, there's probably no chance of that ever happening. But when you talk to Kane fans, they still believe that we will see the day Kane will be a meaningful WWE champion and have a reign worth talking about years from now that will be instilled in the minds of wrestling fans. They have never given up hope. They have never given up the dream of Kane being champion. So should we, as radio shows and columnists, give up on the dream and the hope they have of Kane being champion? Should we believe just as much as they all do that Kane will be champion? Now, there were also, of course, jokes being thrown around about Sting versus Kane if Sting were to win the championship in the fallout of last September's Night of Champions pay-per-view, with how Kane came out revealing himself as the number one contender to Seth Rollins' championship, of course promoting the fact that Kane was no longer going to be the director of operations just to get him out of that role. That proved to be really the only purpose of that storyline. You could have went the way if Sting wasn't injured when he came out of that match as champion, which I initially believed was the way to go. The route was, of course, for Sting to win the championship, but because of the injury, they had to stop the match and prolong the championship reign of Seth Rollins, probably when creative didn't even want to prolong the reign of Seth Rollins as champion. The only logical explanation to Seth Rollins' reign continuing was the fact that Vince and Triple H were never going to let WCW win and have Sting be champion, but I think the initial reaction was that Sting was going to win the championship because fans would have rioted, and then you probably would have went the direction of having Sting versus Kane, even though it might have been a feud that fans probably wanted to see. I think it would have been a great way of also pushing Kane again, another missed out on opportunity. So I think that something really needs to happen for Kane, either in the way of Kane versus The Undertaker, even if it isn't for a championship, or at least one meaningful reign as WWE Champion really needs to be getting in there for Kane. And the graphic I've chosen to use for this video blog, of course, very appropriately, is Kane holding the WWE Championship over his shoulder, because that is an image I think that wrestling fans want to see, even if it is 5 or 10 years from now, and Kane is still with WWE into the future, looking into the future. If I could give a glimpse to the future, I think that's an image that wrestling fans still believe one day we will see in a WWE ring. Sting, Kane holding that WWE Championship over his shoulder, and I think I can go on record for saying that one day we probably will see that, because I refuse to give up on hope or the dream of Kane fans out there, of course, who believe that one day Kane will be WWE Champion, holding that title very deservingly over his shoulder, which he's done before in the past. But the only times we've seen him hold that championship over his shoulder was when he was world champion, of course, on SmackDown, feuding with The Undertaker for the majority of his rivalry again. Reiterating the fact that Kane really didn't have much of a challenge when he was champion, because most of his matches as champion were to promote a feud between himself and The Undertaker, when, of course, Kane had left The Undertaker in a vegetated state. Remember that disastrous storyline and how it went nowhere, and then eventually here comes Edge out of nowhere defeating Kane in a TLC match. We all remember how that went and how that turned out, which is why I think Kane still is waiting on that meaningful reign as champion. Whether or not it'll get in there remains to be seen. We still have a lot of unanswered questions as pertains to the future of Kane, but I still hold the belief that one day, like millions of other Kane fans out there and fans of the new Demon Kane, that Kane will be a meaningful champion in the very near future. And I think I can go on record for saying I think I can speak for all Kane fans when I say it couldn't happen soon enough. I'm your host, Jonathan Clarke, and I will see you next week. You can get in touch with me and let me know what's on your mind through social media. On Facebook at facebook.com/HEW Entertainment, on Twitter at Jonathan Clarke1, on YouTube, by the way, where I'll be featuring this video at youtube.com/Jonathan Clarke22 now, with over 2,000 videos uploaded and over 60,000 channel views. The conversation's also ongoing over on my Google Plus page, and I think I can get away with saying that you'll probably be missing out on a lot in the way of conversation for entertainment and wrestling if you chose not to subscribe. So subscribe to me on Facebook at facebook.com/HEW Entertainment. Follow my show on Twitter at twitter.com/Jonathan Clarke1, and watch my show's broadcast on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Jonathan Clarke22, and get in on the conversation on my Google Plus fan page at HEW Entertainment. I'm your host, Jonathan Clarke, and I will check in with you again next week. Talk to you really soon.
Like what you hear? Tell us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.